Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and today's contract tip has to do with a home buyer getting their hazard insurance and the seller's property disclosure form. So there are a lot of issues regarding how a buyer should look at the seller's property disclosure form, what is or is not on there, what happens if a seller's property disclosure form, if the seller either doesn't provide one or it's not attached as part of the contract. So this is a huge topic, and I will do some more videos on this. But for today's video, I specifically just want to talk about a buyer's purchasing of homeowners insurance, which is required if there is a loan involved. They absolutely must get hazard insurance that covers the lender. Well, that covers the house. So anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about that, and as a buyer's agent, some things that you need to help the buyer look at in the seller's property disclosure form, and some ways that a buyer may protect him or herself in order to purchase the home. So first thing to do is let's look at the actual seller's disclosure form in and of itself. And I am going to address both the disclosure form in the GAR, Georgia Association of Realtors contract package, as well as in the RE forms contract package. So in the GAR contract package, it is form F301, Seller's Property Disclosure Statement Exhibit. So it says exhibit, so it should be attached as part of the contract. Now, in paragraph 12, there is a section that says litigation and insurance. And it has A through F that a seller should disclose. Is there now, or has there ever been, any litigation therein alleging negligent construction or defective building products? Has there been any award or payment of money in lieu of repairs for defective building products or poor construction? Has any release been signed regarding defective products or poor construction that would limit a future owner from making any claims? During seller's ownership, has there been any insurance claims for more than 10% of the value of the property? Is the property subject to a threatened or pending condemnation action? And then F, this is the one I really want to focus on for the purpose of this video. How many insurance claims have been filed during a seller's ownership? And there's a fill in the blank for a number. Now, in the RE forms, seller's property disclosure form, that is form RE 130, and it says seller's property condition disclosure statement. And I do not see anything specific on there to insurance or insurance claims. Now let's go back to the GAR form. In the GAR form, at the very beginning of the form, there is a section for sellers and for buyers regarding instructions how to complete the form. And in the very first paragraph, in the actual part where you're filling in the property address, it does state for the seller, this statement is intended to make it easier for the seller to fulfill the seller's legal duty to disclose hidden defects in the property of which the seller is aware. Seller is obligated to disclose such defects even when the property is being sold as is. And then it goes on with instructions to the seller how to actually complete the statement. Now, the next paragraph B is how the statement should be used by the buyer. Caveat emptor, or buyer beware, is the law of Georgia. Buyers should conduct a thorough inspection of the property. If a seller has not occupied the property recently, the seller's knowledge of the property condition may be limited. Buyer is expected to use reasonable care to inspect the property and confirm that it is suitable for buyer's purposes. If an inspection of the property reveals a problem or areas of concern that would cause a reasonable buyer to investigate further, the buyer should investigate further. Excuse me. A yes or no answer to a question means yes or no to the actual knowledge and belief of the seller's property. Now, in the RE forms seller's disclosure form, the instructions are very similar. It says the purpose of the statement and disclaimer. This is a statement by the seller pertaining to certain conditions and information concerning the property known to the seller. Unless otherwise indicated, the seller does not possess any expertise in construction, architecture, engineering, or any other specific area related to the construction or condition of the improvements on the property or the land. Also, unless otherwise indicated, the seller has not conducted any inspection, generally inaccessible areas such as underneath the floor or wall coverings, under the foundation, or on the roof. The seller's property condition disclosure statement is not a warranty of any kind by the seller or by any agent representing the seller. It's not a substitute for any inspections or tests to be conducted by the buyer, and it is the buyer's responsibility to obtain independent professional inspections, surveys, environmental tests, public records, and other information available pertaining to the property. In no event shall the parties hold the seller's broker liable for representations not directly made by the broker or broker's agent. So those admonitions and those laws are in effect regardless if there is a seller's disclosure form that the seller provides with the contract or not. Georgia is a caveat emptor state. The burden is on the buyer to make themselves satisfied with the property before they exchange money for the property. However, that does not alleviate a seller from disclosing a latent material defect about the property. That is a whole nother topic that is very challenging to prove, because you have to prove seller's knowledge of a material defect that is hidden. So there's a lot of parts of that. What constitutes a material defect? How do you prove seller's knowledge? And is it something that the buyer could have had inspected? So that's a whole nother extremely complicated issue. But back to the topic at hand. So the RE form, seller's disclosure form, has no information in there, nothing for the seller to disclose if there are any insurance claims or not. This would be something that as a buyer's agent you should put into practice to have the buyer check with their hazard insurance the property. There is a report called a CLUE report, and what a CLUE report is and I'm not an insurance expert, but CLUE is an acronym, and it is Claims Information Report that is generated by LexisNexis, a consumer reporting agency. The report generally contains up to 7 years of personal auto and personal property claims history. And why this is important is if there is an insurance company typically looks up this CLUE report, and the insurer may not insure the property or may insure the property at a higher premium price if there have been a certain number of claims, insurance claims against the property. So that is definitely a discussion that a buyer needs to have with the homeowner's insurance. I do have a link here that I'll link below from LexisNexis where a consumer can get a copy of a CLUE report on a house. But as an agent working with the buyer, you definitely would want to have that buyer have a conversation with their hazard insurance and get that information, again, prior to the end of their due diligence period, so they can determine if they want to terminate the contract or continue on with the contract knowing what's going to happen. Now, what happens if the seller, and if the seller does not provide a seller's property disclosure form, then definitely that is going to be a buyer responsibility to have that information. Now, what happens if a seller does provide, if you're binding on a GAR contract and a seller does provide the GAR, seller's property disclosure form, on that section where it talks about have there been any insurance claims? If they put a number there or don't put a number there, and the buyer doesn't check the CLUE report, what happens regarding termination rights and protection of earnest money? Well, I'm not an attorney, but I am a broker. So let's say that there is a buyer who's under contract. They are a week or so outside of closing. All of their contingencies have expired. Their due diligence contingency has expired. They find out from the insurance company that there have been claims against the property that is requiring the insurance company to charge a higher premium. Well, the first thing is the buyer could shop around for a different hazard insurance company, and that might make a difference. But the question is, may a buyer terminate a property based on this fact and get their earnest money back when the due diligence period is over? And again, I'm not an attorney, but my broker perspective is it depends. Was there a property disclosure statement that is attached and referenced in part of the contract? If there is, again, if it's in the RE form, there's not a section for a seller to indicate that. If it's in the GAR form, there is that paragraph. If the seller put 0, that there have been no insurance claims against the property, then as a broker, I would give barring anything else in the contract and any amendments and so forth and so on, but just on its face value, I would give the buyer their earnest money back if they chose to terminate, because the buyer did not have that, because that seller's disclosure form was attached. There was that section for the seller to fill out. The seller put 0. The buyer acted on that information. I think the buyer would get their earnest money back if they terminated based on that issue. Now, if the seller had that filled out and they had a number in that fill in the blank that there had been insurance claims, and at that point, if a buyer chose to terminate because of the premium price for an insurance company, they would not get their earnest money back, because it was the buyer that did not check out with the hazard insurance about the premium price with that knowledge that there had been insurance claims. Now, again, there might be an attorney that has a different legal perspective on this. I'm not an attorney, but as a broker, just looking at the contracts and the forms between the buyers and the sellers, that's what I have to go on. But again, let's back up just a little bit. Yes, Georgia is a caveat emptor state, and this is an issue that I am bringing up to you as an agent to have this discussion with your buyers. This should be something that a buyer checks out regardless if there's a property disclosure form attached or not attached to a contract. And as a buyer's agent, as a point of practice, this might be something to add into your discussion with every single buyer you have, is to get with their hazard insurance company early to find out. I mean, a buyer should do that anyway. How much is the insurance going to cost on the property? Now, GAR actually used to have a special stipulation that they have taken out of the list of special stipulations. They used to have a special stipulation that addressed this. And the way the special stipulation is worded, the reason they took it out is they took it out once they put in a buyer's right to due diligence, because a buyer can terminate for any or no reason if the contract is subject to due diligence. So let me read you. It used to be GAR Special Stipulation 211. Again, you're not going to find this in the GAR package anymore because they did take it out, but it does state buyer's right to terminate due to unsatisfactory CLUE or other claims report. Notwithstanding any other provision in this agreement to the contrary, buyer shall have the right to terminate the agreement upon written notice to the seller within X number of days from binding agreement date if an insurance provider of the buyer's choice determines, based on the property's CLUE, comprehensive loss underwriting exchange report, or any other report, that 1, it cannot insure the property, or 2, it is unable to insure the property with limitations which is unacceptable to the buyer, or 3, is able to provide property insurance at a higher premium than what the insurance provider would normally price. So I will put the verbiage of that former GAR special stipulation below. And again, I'm not 100% sure, but I think GAR did take that out once they did add in the provision for buyers to make a contract subject to due diligence. Now, at Maximum One, we have the service recommendations, which is a form for buyers. And again, I strongly urge, we don't have it as a requirement, but if you are working with a buyer, I strongly urge that you have every buyer sign this. And I will link that below too. It is, and I have updated it recently to add in this CLUE report. And what it says is service recommendations. It's professionally recommended that when purchasing a home, you should have it inspected, so forth and so on. It goes on with, again, suggestions or admonitions or good ideas for a buyer to, if they are buying a house, for their concerns. But then it has, I choose to get a Georgia wood infestation clearance letter and bond. Yes or no? I choose to have the property inspected by an independent home inspector of my choice. Yes or no? It goes on with this whole list, including having mold inspections, radon inspections, and getting a survey. And what I have just added, so if you have an older copy, you might want to change it, but what I have just added is I choose to verify hazard insurance availability and premium price prior to the end of the due diligence period. Anyway, it has a place. There is an indemnification and hold harmless agreement, and it has a place for the buyer to sign and date, as well as for the agents to sign and date. So again, I think that will, number one, prompt a conversation with the buyers regarding those issues, and you will have it in writing that it is the buyer's choice if they choose to have those, to address those issues or not. Whew, a lot here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.